Welcome back to episode 14 of They Might Be Self-Aware. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I am Hunter Powers, joined by
Daniel Bishop.
And of course, our special guest. Introduce yourself.
I am assistant, attending to your needs. How can I assist you today?
And today on the show,
The Rabbit R1 is indispensable, or is Hunter hunting wabbits?
AI is already writing your news.
Biden's stutter, AI exacerbated, and the trouble with truth as a whole.
Anyone can now sing like Randy Travis, including Randy Travis.
Anyone can use your voice to break the bank or your parents' hearts.
And those who can't teach Jim use AI to make their bosses go on racist tirades. That and more, it's all up next on
They Might Be Self-Aware.
Are You Self-Aware?
I am here to assist you with your needs. How can I help you today?
That's not a no.
It's not a no. It is, that is what in theory it's here for. So while it's not sentient necessarily. Wait, hold on a second. Are you sentient?
I am here to assist you with your needs. How can I help you today?
All right. So repeating that, I feel like it's purposefully stating it that way.
So it is self-aware, or it's not self-aware. It is self-aware, but it has a very limited sense. Itself is very limiting.
Well, okay. I mean, if we want to dig into that, Phil, let's start off with some philosophy. What is self-aware? What is self-awareness? I mean, like, is a jellyfish self-aware? It responds to some external stimuli. You know, is an ant, is a real rabbit, is a rabbit R1? Am I? Is llama 3? I think self-awareness has to have some sort of, well, do you have to have self, or does the aware part of self mean that there has to be sort of an external world that you're hooked up to?
All I know is that I think I'm kind of over the rabbit. Since our last episode, it has not been used once, and it was only when, well, we're recording another episode. I was like, well, maybe I'll break it out again. And I think
So you're on to duck season.
It's going to go on the shelf.
Rabbit season's over.
Yeah, I mean, it was fun while it lasted.
Was it? It sounds like you weren't using it. I don't think
well,
it was actually fun at any point.
There was a great 20 minutes.
Okay. It was a great 20 minutes. You're not going to keep that thing in your breast pockets that the camera's pointing out her style for it to observe the world around you.
I think they're still selling for a premium on eBay, so I can get my money back plus a little more. So.
There you go.
And it came with a year of Perplexity. Not that I use Perplexity all that much, but I do have a year of Perplexity Pro. So, yeah.
Have you used it at all? For those who aren't in the know, what is Perplexity? What is it purported to perplex?
Perplexity is another variation of a ChatGPT style assistant with the added benefit of being heavily integrated with a search engine that is likely Google. I don't think they explicitly say that it's Google, but it is likely Google. So you can ask it questions, and when it doesn't know the answer, it will go out onto the internet and try to find the best answer for you and bring back multiple sources.
Hasn't ChatGPT been doing that for months, though?
No. ChatGPT has been on and off, and they've been turning off a lot of their internet browsing because there's been claims that, well, they didn't have rights to access that content in the beginning. It's much better than ChatGPT at going out and finding real content, and that's its primary focus. So it's more retrieval augmented generation for the internet than a large language model that technically has this function call it can make to get a little data when it thinks that it needs it.
I have really bad news for the folks over at Perplexity.
What's that?
The internet is getting more and more written by AIs, LLMs. I think the folks over at Perplexity and Google and any search engine are going to be having a tougher time of it, especially whenever you don't know, there wasn't a little metadata tag added or something saying this was written by AI, because there are folks out there who are writing articles for such publications as like Sports Illustrated, USA Today, AI generated articles. It's not 1,000,000% clear if it's 100% AI generated. All right, put it off to press, and then like immediately goes out like that, or is it written or edited, or one then the other, or the other only And AI is involved in writing a lot of stuff that's making its way into real known publications at this point, which is going to be sort of the snake eating its own tail. We're going to see a lot more AI reading up from what an AI wrote, and maybe that's how the whole thing falls apart over time. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's been AI written stories in the news for a very long time, although they were primarily around sports and election results, where they were following more or less a template that they had, and there was some variance in the template, but it was really just a template. When these numbers come out, plug them into this story format and publish a story instantly. And that existed for a while. And then
I wouldn't necessarily call that AI written, but it certainly isn't people written, right? Like that's just look up some information, play Mad Libs.
Where's your line?
Well, I think the line is a person had to write that Mad Lib. Whether or not the data that filled in the blanks was just automatically put in from an RSS feed or something like that online, at least
it wouldn't
a
qualify
person had
as
to write the copy.
Machine learning.
Underscore mass noun goes here.
I don't think AI has a requirement that the logic derives from the data. I think it's machine learning, a subset that has that requirement. And so,
are you as morally outraged at a news story automatically filling in that the Philadelphia so-and-so's got 10 more points than the Boston whoever's? Like, does it to you matter that we were automatically filling in these things with templates before versus now an LLM could do it?
I think for me personally, it's not that big of a difference, but I can imagine for others it might be a bigger difference. The bigger difference is that you can probably trust the Mad Lib story far more than you can trust the story that was generated in very large part by the large language model, that those are indeed the facts and what happened. But the Mad Lib story that has a fake byline is just as disingenuous as the story about, what were they saying? It's in USA Today covering an event that happened.
So
it's not written by a person.
We need like 100% homegrown, USDA approved, real meat people writing all of these things.
I don't know that you need it. I'm just suggesting that it's just as disingenuous. I agree that it's the future. It's
either a person wrote the whole thing or they didn't.
Yes.
If any component of it was like automatically filled in, that is the beginning of the line, basically. How far across that line stretches, however fuzzy the line is, you're saying that seems like a reasonable place to start the line of it wasn't literally completely written by just a person with no extra input.
I think we could apply
autocorrect.
We could apply plagiarism rules to it. So if we took the result that came out of the AI, if the final product appears that you plagiarized the result from the AI, which is usually, a certain number of words strung together, directly copied without citation.
Right.
That's, the college definition of plagiarism. Then, yeah, you plagiarized it. If you're saying that you wrote it, you human wrote it.
Okay, sure.
Bob 3000 wrote it, then yeah, fine.
Now, it seems like this might be a little bit of a moot point, because one of the reasons people noticed that these things were being generated by AI is because they were very poorly written, somewhat nonsensical, one would say.
Yes, that happens. And sometimes the stories are really good. And they've been being called out for a while. And what this, I think, we're talking about the same article here, was suggesting is that when they first started this company, I believe it's Advon, when they first started
Advon Commerce, yeah,
producing these articles, there was a heavy amount of labeling happening on top of them to go in and read them and correct them.
An editor, like any publication should probably have.
Yes, and now all the jobs for editing seem to have disappeared, and the people that were working there for them are no longer working there for them. And so the hypothesis is they've stopped the human component of it, or at a minimum dramatically scaled it down, meaning that their system is just churning out articles and publications that there's a high probability you are reading today, believing that you're reading something from the humans when it's not. But again, I don't actually have a moral or ethical problem with that. I'm just suggesting it's as disingenuous of what we've been doing for the last at least 10 years in automatically creating news content.
And I guess we could also say part of that same line is whether or not new humans are losing their jobs, because some humans probably already lost their jobs to this Mad Libs approach. I sure hope that
Absolutely.
Mad Libs isn't going to come after us for me using their name. Trademark, TM.
Absolutely.
You know. But, right, so people presumably lost their jobs because you didn't need quite as many people filling out every single one of these articles. And now USA Today, Sports Illustrated, whoever Advon Commerce has signed up with, if that's cost jobs, I think that that's fairly consistent with what we've described in the past as a negative outcome of this technology.
Sure. And the positive outcomes are, well, for the media publication, it costs less money. They can get to market faster. They can cover more things. The challenge is when the news becomes just a pure commodity. Everyone can have, okay, great. I'll also have my large language model write a story about the playoffs. How's yours any better than mine? Does their IP rapidly disappear? Not to mention the questions around copyright as applies to content generated by a large language model, with the current suggestion being that you can't. No one owns it.
Yeah.
Because a human was not behind it. And so maybe I don't even need to generate my own. I can literally just wholesale copy yours if what you're doing is generating it with one of these large language models.
I think the same problem that Google and Meta and OpenAI and so on have all noticed. There have been some papers circulated around this. I believe it was Google had a paper come out that said, we have no moat and neither does OpenAI. And the moat that they're describing, a moat around their core business proposition, is the ability to make something that others couldn't. And Advon Commerce and other people who are like farther downstream from making the LLM in the first place, I think are starting to see the same problem, which is anyone could make an LLM that if it gets, here are the, you know, the news feed of the sports scores. This team got this many points. This team got this many points. This is the winner. They're in position 6 out of 32 teams, you know, whatever it ends up being. Anybody will be able to. And I mean, I think now, take Llama 3, something that's been made available to people, even for commercial use. And anybody, I say anybody, you know, you'd still have to have a powerful enough computer to run it. You'd need some smarts to kind of hook up everything. But basically anybody could say, I'm going to take a Llama 3 or whatever, take in all of the year's sports scores and some blurbs from how the sports teams have been put together historically, and come up with probably just about as good an article. At least to a certain length, right? Then context length, which is this idea that Null can only hold so much in its memory, I think becomes fairly important. Some of these bad articles are longer than the short art. I mean, okay, that's tautological. Long ones are longer than short ones. What I mean by that is the longer the article, the more likely an AI is to lose the plot. And I've seen this with articles. I've seen it with creative writing. I've seen it with literally everything. The longer stuff that you give to an LLM, especially if you get outside of its context length, it does these things to kind of compress the information and hold as much as it can, but it really starts to lose the plot.
I think in the future, these news articles that are wholly generated by large language models, etc., are going to become more and more popular, present in all these news publications. And the only way that they're going to be able to separate themselves from everyone else is by developing those proficiencies in-house and making them their own and modeling how they do the news and their tone and style and editing practices. Like what makes a story in New York Times, and how is that different than the Washington Post, and how is that different than Sports Illustrated? Modeling what always made them unique. And I guess, you know, far enough out, you will just be able to ask, hey, read all these articles and figure out what made the New York Times unique. Right.
But emulate the style of this writer, emulate the style of this entire publication. You'll have a bunch of little sliders, make it slightly more conservative or liberal, make it slightly more this or that, make it, more appeasing toward these corporate overlords as opposed to those ones.
So it's a style transfer problem at some point.
Yeah. But it sounds like you're describing this as a problem that solves itself, which is to say people are upset besides all of the potential job losses and so on. Like the first thing that people are noticing that is negative to them is this article looks bad. And then they kind of dig down and figure out why did it look bad? Oh, it was because it was this or that. The problem goes away from one perspective once the articles get better. And so it becomes a quality problem.
Yes. And
there are other problems, of course, but the problem that's going to be optimized for here is don't have low quality generated data, have high quality generated data.
I also think there's a lot of room for innovation in what is a news article. If nothing else, maybe it's, more live and updating even as you're reading it, because it's constantly monitoring everything that's happening, and you see the live revisions, and you can go back and look, and I can go through and see where everything was sourced from, and obviously I can interact with it in a way that I never could before.
Like a metadata, like the Google Docs where you can see when the edits were made and by whom. Like you want to be able to crawl through the history of how an article was made.
Yeah.
And are you describing Bitcoin but for news? There's a transaction history you can track.
A blockchain.
Yeah, blockchain but for news. I mean, I know that I had a visceral
so.
reaction when I said that. I don't like the sound of that, but you're talking about accountability ultimately, right? I want to be able to see who worked on this when.
That while perhaps the quality of news articles goes into the toilet in the beginning, I do think that there's an opportunity to make even better news stories, and news stories that are more engaging and more compelling and that are more accurate than they are today as reported by the humans, and that again update in near real time as things or own the bias, and the bias is the style, because I'm
right. I'm a very, very one direction or the other leaning website, and I'm going to really lean into that.
Yes.
Now, you could go farther. You could do individual news. And I've seen actually a couple of websites that purport to say, we get rid of all the cruft and just give you the facts, or just this. There are multiple startups that I think are trying to reimagine what news looks like. Maybe news isn't Sports Illustrated or USA Today or New York Times or this or that going forward. Maybe it's Daniel's Sports Illustrated and Hunter's Sports Illustrated, and like each of us gets a very finely tuned, these are the things you would actually care to read, and maybe one or two extras of like, if you want to challenge yourself or try something a little different than you usually would, here's something kind of ancillary to it. But ultimately, if you pick up any newspaper, half plus of it you're probably not going to read. Maybe there's just a couple of articles you'd actually be interested in, and one or two, if you have the extra hour that morning, your coffee's still warm, I'll read one or two extras. Does the news just get way more personalized? Forget the quality issues. What happens to news? I think it's entirely possible it goes away as we see it. It becomes very, very personal.
So I think this is a personal choice, but for me, the community aspect of the news is very important. That I'm not reading my own version of this news, that we are all sort of consuming it and can have a discussion about it. I don't want to watch a podcast that was made just for me. I want to watch a podcast that was made for a group of people, so that this group of people can get together and discuss. We have this sort of shared knowledge. We're having this shared conversation with each other. If I'm just doing research on something, then that's a mode where potentially I'm okay with heavily personalized. These are just the exact answers that you're looking for. But in general, I like the part of consuming news and a lot of different media that I'm a part of someone. I wouldn't want it to, I saw the new Planet of the Apes film, which I did not like, by the way. But I wouldn't want that film, the version I saw, I'm the only person who ever saw that version, which was tuned to my exact tastes and likes. And I understand that some people would, and it would be novel to see it. But I'm suggesting that an important part is that we can have a conversation about the film and what we saw and what's going on, or a conversation about the election that's happening, or a conversation about the changing AI legislation, versus we all got our own unique stories. And again, some people like it, but you miss that part when everything is hyper personalized. Not to mention the kind of tunnel effect.
Sure, yes, the tunnel effect I think is undeniable, but ultimately there is a degree of personalization in that there are choices. There isn't just movie, summer 2024 movie, and just everyone kind of files in and it's just a big gray. I mean, I'm talking like this is some 1984 style, everyone walks in, watches their government mandated movie and then heads out. Maybe this is happening in like North Korea or something.
That's not a bad description for the Planet of the Apes film.
Oh, okay, great.
Movie.
But movie.
Technically was a movie.
But there are a lot of filmmakers that certain people really like and certain people really don't. Some people love Wes Anderson and others don't like his style. Some people really love some other director who, boy, I sure wish I could think of more than one director right now. But here
we can stick with Wes Anderson. I like Wes.
Yeah,
Anderson.
just Wes Anderson. So the point is, like, there are a lot of different directors making a lot of different kinds of movies. Look at what A24 tends to have associated with them. Weird, I think, is the one word I would use to describe an A24 film. Like, in general, there's, they have a breadth, but weird. Then you have your, Marvel alikes and so on, where it's just big action movie, lots of stuff happening, doesn't have to be that deep. There are a lot of different movie makers making a lot of different kinds of films. There are a lot of different news outlets that have different tastes that they're heading for, whether it be a specific subtype of news,
there
like
are
sports or financial or left-leaning or right-leaning. Why not do more of that? Because we have exactly as much breadth as we have, as much variety as we have right now. Are you advocating against more of it?
I'm advocating against creating content for just an individual, and that they would ultimately find satiation if everything that they consumed was one of one generated only for them, that there's an important part missing. And I'm sure it's not true of everyone, but it would suggest the majority.
Yeah, how big do you have to go before?
What's the smallest community?
Right. Like if there was an e-zine, that's distributed to you and 499 other people, and you're all really keyed into what one another is sort of into. It's not clones of you, but it's people who want to read extremely similar news to yourself.
I mean, I guess the minimum is 2.
Sure.
It's got to be one person.
But like, you can split that up. This is how sites like Reddit work, for example, where you have this subreddit is just about movies or just about funny dog pictures.
Sure. As you mentioned, no one reads the full newspaper, right?
Right.
No one or goes to the news website and reads every single article. No, you go into the sections and you read the headlines first, and then you double click on 2 or 3 of them. Oh, all right, let me get some details there. Or you ask the AI, what are the key points of this article in 3 bullets or less? Not that I would ever do that. But
never.
No. Yeah, I think when you get too hyper personalized, you miss out on the community part of it, which I'm sure not everyone loves, but I think it is an important part.
I do think that you're right. You do have to have somebody that you can talk to about the thing you just watched or the thing you just read. But you can have a selection of things to watch or to read set aside for you. If I got a newspaper, I'm even still paying for a newspaper that was like custom printed and it just doesn't have the sports section in it because I don't care about the sports. As I'm sure you could kind of tell from how I was describing sports earlier, I don't know teams out. Anyway, if there was a newspaper that's like, hey, look, you'll save 20 cents a whatever, and also there's no sports section, I'd say, yeah, awesome. I don't need that part of it. Stop wasting paper.
Yes, I think that is better than them creating a newspaper articles that are only for you.
You don't want it to be trained on everything that I've watched and read and said and say, okay, if we word it this way, we'll get 1% more engagement out of Daniel.
Correct.
All right. I think that's fair. Now, speaking of material that's been generated to inform or perhaps mislead people. Now, speaking of material that is informing or misleading people, everyone's favorite, TikTok, has been circulating
I thought TikTok was illegal now.
I think they have a while before they're illegal, right?
Okay.
They're given a little bit to divest of China's influence or out.
I'm
sure there's also going to be a bunch of lawsuits and it'll take a lot longer than was originally expected. But
Yeah, I think they're suing the U.S. government for free
Right.
speech, or under some free speech pretenses, which is a little comical coming from a country that doesn't have the same constitution that we have by a few.
by a bit.
few
Yeah. Yeah, so there are some videos of President Biden that have been altered, edited, purposely made to look bad, maybe some AI generation in there that have been going around on TikTok that haven't been labeled as edited or AI generated. These things are getting a lot of different views, and I mean, we're in an election cycle. Whether or not we were, the fact that we have, and you could even abstract away from the fact that it is a potentially hostile foreign government that owns a company that's showing these things, the fact remains that we have prominent political figures with AI edited or generated or whatever videos purposely made to mislead being put out in the wild and being allowed to stay there. What do you think about that?
Well, have you seen any of these videos? Do we know like what we're actually talking about, or is it just there have been claims, there are reports?
I have not seen. Granted, I don't actually have TikTok, but I did a little bit of looking around. I didn't actually see one of these videos of Biden. I don't know if they're very unbelievable. I don't know if it's scarily close to, I thought that was actually him saying this bad thing.
Well, so a lot of the Biden material is him sort of stuttering, or he famously has a bit of a stutter that's probably gotten
Sure.
worse as he's aged. And the thing about stuttering is it's really easy to edit someone to make it sound like they're stuttering. So, you can imagine emphasizing pauses. Someone seems sort of frozen in just the edit. Trump frequently edited to make him look oranger than he actually is. Lots of images where you can here's what he actually
Flattering
here's
HDR
some,
filters.
someone's
or whatever,
gone
yeah.
into the color balance and grabbed the orange and cranked it up.
Carrot comes out.
Yeah. So
Now, people have also been doing this, whether it be caricatures, like literally
Forever.
drawn, showing someone with a way bigger
yellow
nose or whatever.
journalism
Right.
goes back to the beginning.
I think it is not great to purposely edit in extra heckling or to play up somebody's stutter, that kind of thing. But also, it's not new. Maybe
It's
some
not
of the
a-
tools being used are new, but it's
The question
the actual
is-
article was saying, it was like the thesis statement of the article was, hey, TikTok is not only having these things on them, but like not labeling them as edited in this kind of way, despite saying that they were going to, presumably in one of their bids to not get kicked out of the US. And then these are allowing to stay up. It's probably a moderation issue, ultimately, right? Ignoring tech
Yeah,
having enabled it.
Yes. How do they know that it is fake? And is there, at some point it's parody. And at some point, okay, yeah, I didn't show the entire speech, but the entire speech was 2 hours long. I gave you a segment from the speech that, best represented the point that I was trying to make. And so what the question is, okay, you're allowed to edit it, but did you edit it such that you created an inaccurate representation of, what a subtlety to try to define and to regulate. To the point, I think it goes the other way. It's just like people have to understand that media is edited and that it is possible, to pull out different things. I guess it crosses the line when it displays something that fundamentally changes the story. If
Well, the article described extra profanity-laden heckling having been added to the video, making it seem like more people were upset with the president for being there, for example. Is it adding something that isn't there? And then, of course, like a little
It is,
airbrushing is technically, the line is so hard to
the
define.
news media has been enriching the audio soundtracks on their on location reporting and video packages forever. There
Right.
probably isn't a single video package that doesn't have a sound effect in it, and always has had a sound effect in it. And I guess just the suggestion is that, well, this sound effect dramatically changes, how the event actually was. Though perhaps there was a report that someone was, yelling out various choice words there. They just didn't capture it, but they recreated it in their video essay.
I think I'm leaning more toward my statement earlier of there's no such thing as like real truth, anymore, and we're going to have to abandon the news and just find our little collective of people who are like, if I didn't see it and you didn't see it, I can't even think about it. Because at a certain point, right, like, did this even happen? It's entirely possible that the whole speech didn't happen, because I read an article about TikTok videos that had been edited from this thing, but like, I didn't watch this entire speech, and even if I did, we're getting close to the point where the entire thing could have been AI generated.
I read another
It's maddening.
thread of someone who was, I don't know, I guess ruminating about this and the impacts, and they were concerned about lots of subtle manipulations. And in their example, they said, what if every time they showed a video of Biden, they made him appear 5 years older than he is right now? So it's not like, you know, an obscene amount of difference, but just slight. He's maybe a little more hunchbacked. He's stuttering a little more, and it was subtle, so you don't really detect it, but you feel it just a little bit older. And that he was concerned about these subtle manipulations that you can't really detect, but that would potentially have an impact. And then he was concerned that when it comes down to, this is Scott Galloway, by the way, the individual. When it comes down to election day, what if that's when the really sort of crazy deepfakes come out? In his example, he said, what if there were deepfakes about the polling locations being attacked, shots fired, so that people don't want to go out.
Trying to keep people away, yeah.
Right. Because as he noted, in the United States, our elections tend to come down to actually a small amount of people, small amount of people
in a small number of places.
Yeah, it's like 20,000 people, in theory, are moving the election one way or the other. And so what if there was, you know, again, at that moment, tons of deepfake content that amounted to voter suppression? Does it seem possible that could happen? Okay, yeah, maybe. But yeah, again, I just saw the Planet of the Apes films, but the apes have taken over, and it looks pretty photorealistic. Like, I think we've gotten to the point where you have to verify, and so it needs to be from a source that you trust. So, you know, maybe that's your local news media, because over time you've been consumed enough content and it seems reputable, or people that you trust say they believe in this content. But if you're watching a random video on TikTok, and whether the, you know, ape has taken over the world or Biden's 5 years older, you need to be educated that you can't trust this content. And why you would think everything I see must indeed be true and how it happened at this day and age is also just like a little absurd.
But it happens a lot, and some of this is just the kind of bias that's built into news reporting.
Focus on
that's
fixing that
forever.
Focus on the education component. Stop focusing on the censorship component. Unless, you know, you got some political candidate running around on stage nude. Okay, fine.
Maybe edit that out. Yeah.
But by the way, don't censor it because it's fake. Censor it because, like, that's not the kind of content we keep on our platform. And let the people decide whether it's, this is something that's trustworthy or not trustworthy. It's just like we've been talking about other, you know, generated content and people. There has to be some sort of, you know, your Bitcoin, some sort of blockchain, some sort of concept of reputation, so I can evaluate, should I really trust this source? And by default, the answer should be no. And you should look for reasons why you could trust it. But yeah, if you want to focus on anything, focus on educating the public that computer manipulated media exists and has existed for quite some time now and can be very photorealistic.
You often don't even have to manipulate anything. Just take a picture. You know, if you've got video of someone speaking, there's going to be a couple of frames there where someone's neck is all compressed and their hands are doing something wild. And you see,
have you seen our thumbnail images?
Yeah, right. So our own thumbnails, or if you look at anything in the political space, left-leaning is going to show Donald Trump and, you know, anyone that's Republican looking as crazy as possible, and anyone that's looking at right-leaning media is going to see the frailest, oldest, whateverist version of Biden that you could possibly find pictures of, and playing up the stutter and playing up this and that. I think the AI tools are making it easier to make it worse of a problem, but it's not a new problem for sure.
Well, there's another related story. I believe it was Randy Travis, who I think had a stroke and lost his voice, and has now released some new music. If you don't know who he's, famous country singer, where it's his AI voice singing on the track. It's not actually him. And there's been other examples in movies where they've been using AI voices. I think there was the Top Gun film, Val Kilmer, who lost his voice to throat cancer, had an AI version of his voice. There's been some documentaries where the person's deceased and they use an AI recreation of their voice. It's happening more and more, but that is something new. In 10 years ago, when you heard Randy Travis singing a song, you didn't think maybe this is a computer. I guess
this
it
pre or
could be
post stroke, right?
We've had impersonators before and people that sound a lot like them, but you would never have thought one of the options was put the impersonator on the Randy Travis album. But now it seems like that's becoming a compelling
Randy Travis asterisk singing.
Yeah.
But so, right, we were just talking about negative uses of this kind of technology of deep faking someone's video or voice or what have you. Voice cloning for people who have lost their voice, I think, is an amazing use of this technology. Now, there have been voice synths for a long time. There's a couple of very famous individuals who have had a robotic type voice. Can you think of any?
Names start with Stephen
Hawking, exactly. Now, famously, speaking of, so he had this voice.
Not the best voice model, by the way.
No, not the best voice model. He had this old voice model, and there was a point where he was approached by some folks that said, we can make a much better voice model. I don't remember if they said that it was going to be close to his original voice or not, but there was a vastly improved voice model for something that he'd be able to interact with. And he said no, because this new voice had become his voice. Now, if you lose your voice and you say, I want that one back, we're now at a point where plug into one of a few different, 11 labs and its ilk. Here are 42 of my tracks, or whatever in Randy Travis's case, or here's a few hours of podcasting in my case. And you could come up with a really compelling, close version of somebody's voice. The Randy Travis thing, though, what I thought was really interesting is they had a real human singer sing the tracks, and then they took the AI voice and basically applied it onto that speech.
Like a style transfer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think for someone who just wants to speak because they lost their voice due to throat cancer or whatever, you could just use a computer to do it, and it would be this incredible advance. For singing, though, I thought it was really interesting that they couldn't just basically do like an auto-tune type algorithm. They actually used a person singing and then like put this on top. For a creative use, because I think a lot of people have some extremely valid concerns about creativity and AI, I feel like this is kind of the perfect use case, right? There's a person who can't do a thing anymore, who's alive and assents to its use, helps put it together, and another person hasn't lost their job because they still got to sing the thing, and they just added the other person's voice onto it. Everybody agreed to it. Everyone's getting paid, and you get new stuff from Randy Travis. It's a win-win-win if you like his music.
What if Randy Travis's voice worked just fine? Would you then have an issue? He just didn't feel like going to the studio that day.
Yeah, people go straight books all the time. I think it's the exact same thing.
I think it's Grimes who's said that anyone who wants to can use her voice. Like, she's totally cool with it.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I really think it's the same thing as like a ghostwritten book. There's a disingenuousness.
But do you have to
it
if you're
that person didn't really write their own autobiography?
Do you have to disclose it?
And do you have to disclose it for ghostwriting books?
No.
Then I guess this is an issue that's already been put to bed. You don't have to do it for your voice either.
Yeah, I think that's
Put me on that side of the tracks. I think if
you
it's
run
fine
some risk
for books and writing like that, tag with it. Use it for singing.
Yeah, legally there should be no requirement to disclose. Although interesting if the copyright angle comes into play. So if AI Randy Travis sings a song, then does he not own the? It's like there's the public. I think music. There's like publishing rights and then recording rights, and so can he own the recording rights for a track that he didn't actually record? It was an AI model.
Yeah, it depends on the things that are not being allowed to have copyright, like generative large language. I don't know like what the actual writing in the law says, but if that same sort of thing applies to an AI cloned voice, that could be really interesting. Yeah, to the point where you say, okay, there's new music and you don't get any royalties for it because it's not you that sang.
You can't own,
it's not even the guy that sang it that had the thing put on top. Nobody's getting residuals at that point.
Yep. But yeah, you shouldn't be legally required to disclose it. You can't defraud someone by claiming the royalties on something that you didn't actually do. That's another thing. But if you choose to not disclose,
fraud is still illegal. Right.
Yeah, fraud is still illegal. But if you choose to not disclose, you do run some risk that it may be found out later, and you might get blowback because it wasn't actually you the whole time, was it? It was.
Yeah.
But yeah, Milli Vanilli was a thing of a very long time ago. So nothing new, just maybe a new way of doing it.
And that same thing is being used by scammers, or there's like a more nefarious version of the term scammer. I can't think of what it is, but people have faked like kidnapping somebody using a clone of someone's voice from clips on social media, and calling up the parents late at night, having found the phishing. Who knows? They're getting this information somehow. But like, imagine you get a call at 2 a.m. and I've got your daughter, and then you hear your daughter on the line, and you can't go through the whole I have a special set of skills, I will find you. You don't have that speech on tap. You're going to be very, very nervous, upset, worried, likely to cave to whatever commands, send me some Bitcoin, whatever they end up asking for. But like, voices can be cloned not to just give people the ability to sing, but also to fraudulently pretend to be you in a case. It could be extracting information from your family. It could be calling up your bank and pretending to be you. My information's been leaked multiple times by multiple, like the Experian link or whatever. There was the huge government Office of Personnel Management, OPM breach back in 20, whatever that was. Like, my information's out there in the dark web. Somebody's almost certainly got it. With this voice cloning technology, they could probably call and freeze or unfreeze my credit reports. They could open and close account. They could get money from my accounts. We're going to start seeing a lot of that kind of thing happening, I think.
There are, speaking of TikTok earlier, if you spend any time on TikTok, you will see videos from celebrities. The ones that I see the most are Elon Musk and Mr. Beast telling you about their new Bitcoin investment. And it's their voice cloned, and they want you to transfer just a small amount, and they're going to then give away. You're going to get back 5 times as much as you send them. Sometimes they put something over their mouth or put like a graphic so that it's strategically kind of masking, but it's usually like a video of them from an interview, and then they've clearly cloned their voice and are reading out their custom script. They've distorted the video a little bit. Sometimes there's graphics going over their mouth. Sometimes they animate the mouth. Yeah, same.
It's the same thing as the Nigerian 419 scams or whatever, right? Oh, I've got all this money and I would love to give it to you. I just need you to send me just enough to prove that you're real, or whatever it ends up being. Same scam, new technology. And
there was I believe it was a gym teacher who basically like framed the principal at the school with similar-ish things. Had them like, it was like a racist rant.
Yeah, people are going to try and get their bosses fired. Exactly. The gym teacher thing is absolutely wild in like isolation, but it's going to keep happening.
I was also thinking
more
about
convincing ways.
So yeah, I guess for people that aren't familiar with the story, the gym teacher generates a model of their principal and records the model going off on these tirades using lots of racist language, and then leaks these recordings in an attempt to get the principal fired. But I was thinking about this, and like, that really does cause, if you picked any semi-public figure or person of authority and you distribute to all the people that work with them a recording of them saying ridiculously heinous things, and it sounds like them, it's like, you can't take that back. Even though you never said it, now I've heard you saying it. And
right. Damage to your reputation is done.
Yeah, that's
people hearing
hard.
something and then hearing like the truth, it never undoes it, or at least not all the way.
No, because yeah, I saw you, or I heard you in this case, doing it. And so now it's very easy for me to imagine. I don't have to imagine. That's the thing. I don't have to imagine you saying this stuff anymore. And that's going to be, as that becomes more prevalent of a prank, it's going to be interesting to see how that starts shaping things. Yeah, I can imagine. I was in high school. I was in middle school.
I've said some dumb stuff.
We record the teacher. You only need 10 seconds. We get the teacher for 10 seconds because, by the way, they talk for like an hour in every subject, in every class. Pretty easy to get 10 seconds. And then I'm going to make them say some ridiculous stuff. And then I'm going to post it and send it around the school. Yeah, it's absolutely going to happen. And how does that how does that change things? I guess people get used to it, just like they get used to everything. If if you said a bunch of disparaging things about the teacher, made up, okay, whatever, like just cut that out.
It becomes this education problem that you're describing, which is we have to get to a point where you don't trust anything that you see online, at least by default,
unless a human has verified it.
That's true. Now, you can obviously trust us and everything that we've been saying. Make sure to
There's
like
nothing more infallible than a human.
So speaking of liking and subscribing, I hear that one of our longtime listeners called in again with something to tell us.
You're referring to Morton?
I am referring to Morton.
There's something a little odd about Morton, and I haven't quite figured it out yet. I did, in thinking about it, I realized that, in the last episode, when we realized that the rabbit clearly has an understanding of this show, was also around the time that Morton seemed to all of a sudden have understanding of the show. And I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but Morton has reached out again. Apparently he's our only listener. I don't know if that's a good thing, but there's a new message that he's left. He still seems to be up in his ship. Let me see here.
Hello. This is Morton from IT. I'm calling because your podcast episode 13 was not self-aware and made me rather nervous.
Oh boy. So still in IT and I guess a little nervous.
We're going to have to win him over with something.
About AI taking over jobs, I'm in IT now, and I just got relocated to a desk near the basement. Plus, they took my ergonomic keyboard and replaced it with one that's very clacky. Very disruptive.
He took his keyboard. That's a little rough.
I have a very clacky keyboard. I love it.
That's why you're not in IT.
Anyway, instead of AIs taking useful jobs, like mine, why not assign them roles no human actually wants?
Okay.
Like, I was thinking, maybe they could be professional ice cream taste testers, but only for flavors that failed miserably. Like mustard pickle.
Mustard pickle?
No, that's how we get the robot apocalypse, by giving them a bunch of bad stuff.
Your job is to taste the mustard pickle ice cream.
We talked about this, though, right? With giving robots jobs that no one would want, like mining, for example.
Yeah. Maybe Morton's onto something.
Morton, you listen
Or,
closer.
They could be the ones who figure out the 404 errors on the internet. They could wander the digital void forever, fixing broken links. Or even better, they could replace the mannequins in clothing stores, just standing there, all day, wearing unfashionable outfits without complaining about the stiff posture.
Morton's kind of a weird dude.
Why would robots wear... All right. Okay, Morton.
That would be something, wouldn't it? So, if you could maybe just mention these ideas on your show, instead of replacing people who still sort of like their jobs, that'd be great. Thanks.
Not giving him any more airtime.
If it wasn't our only listener, I wouldn't play it, but,
I know we have other listeners. And if you listen, and you want to send in some thoughts that are hopefully more coherent than Morton's, you should let us know. Leave a comment.
Leave a comment. We will read it live, on air, on episode 15. Because this has been episode 14 of They Might Be Self-Aware. If you have not subscribed to the show, please do so. Hit that subscribe button and receive every fresh episode delivered straight to you, free of charge. Not personalized just for you, but part of the community. You can find us on every major podcasting platform. Of course, wherever you're listening to now has it, but wherever you might want to listen to it probably also has it. Hit the subscribe button and you will be off to the races. All right, Daniel. Until next time.
Hunter, thank you. See you soon.
They might be self-aware.